There is a question that separates the people who build something lasting from those who build something fast. It is not, how do I grow faster? It's, what am I willing to lose to grow at all? Most people, when the pressure gets high enough, give up the very thing that made them worth following in the first place. Walter Green almost did. Almost. Walter ran a small bakery in a small town. Nothing glamorous. 6 stools, a chalkboard menu, a bell above the door that rang more out of hope than traffic. His bread was extraordinary, not because of some secret ingredient or marketing strategy, but because of time. Every loaf Walter made began 18 hours before anyone would eat it. A slow fermentation, a living culture, a process that could not, by its very nature, be rushed. The problem? The world had stopped waiting. Across the street, a new chain bakery opened with a sign in the window. Fresh bread in 8 minutes. And they opened at 6 in the morning and produced fresh bread continuously. Every 8 minutes, all day long, never running out. Lines formed before sunrise. People who used to wander into Walter's shop walked straight past it, phones in hand, schedules already packed. Walter opened at 6 too. His bread was ready by then, shaped and baked in the dark hours before dawn. But he could only produce what 18 hours of fermentation allowed. By 8 in the morning, he was often down to his last few loaves. By 9, he was sold out. And the people who arrived at 10, at 11, at noon, they found an empty counter and a handwritten sign, sold out. See you tomorrow. Some of them crossed the street and never came back. His investor called. His numbers were falling. His staff was restless. And a supplier had come forward with a shortcut. An accelerated starter that could cut his fermentation from 18 hours down to 4 and triple his daily output overnight. Walter, his investor said, I'm trying to save you. Just shorten the rise time. Make more bread. Stop turning customers away. And the terrifying truth was, Walter considered it. He sat in his back office that night, staring at a laptop full of red numbers and a phone full of missed opportunities. He was tired, and he was afraid, and he knew, with the cold clarity of a man who has been in the room with failure before, that one decision could change everything. He could speed it up, he could survive, or he could hold. He almost chose speed. Almost. There is a moment in every difficult journey where the path forward requires you to stop running and actually think. For Walter, that moment came at a farmer's market on an unremarkable Saturday morning. An elderly woman tested the loaf with her thumb and breath. Long ferment? She asked. 18 hours, he said. She bought 2 loaves and spoke of her grandmother, a baker in Lyon whose ovens had burned for 4 decades. In 1971, as supermarkets spread and profits thinned, she began using commercial yeast to keep up. The bakery stayed open. The bread changed. The customers felt it, even if they couldn't name it. The warmth left the bread first. Then the loyalty left the customers. And a few years later, the bakery closed anyway. Not with a bang, but with a quiet erosion. A slow forgetting. She said it was the only decision she ever regretted, the old woman told him. Not because it failed quickly, because it succeeded just long enough to make her forget what she'd lost. Walter drove home in silence. He had been asking the wrong questions. He had been asking, how do I make more bread? How do I stop running out? How do I keep customers from crossing the street? But every one of those questions pointed him toward the same answer. Shorten the fermentation, increase the output, compete on volume. And then he finally asked the right question. What am I actually building? If the answer was convenience, he had already lost. The chain across the street would always be faster, always be fuller, always have bread at noon when his counter was bare. He could not win that race, not without becoming them. Now, but if the answer was real bread, bread that took time because time was the ingredient, then shortening the fermentation didn't solve the problem. It erased it. He wasn't losing customers because he ran out of bread. He was losing the wrong customers. The ones who needed bread at noon, who needed guaranteed supply, who needed 8-minute convenience. They were never really his. And trying to hold them was costing him the only thing that made him worth finding in the first place. He didn't shorten the rise time. He returned to the bakery and fed his starter culture instead. It was a small act, but it was a promise. After Walter made his decision to protect the process, 2 of his 3 staff members left. Sales continued to fall. Social media found him briefly, and not kindly. People commented that his slow bread was a luxury for people with nothing to do. Or someone posted a side-by-side photo of his loaf and the chain's loaf with the caption, "One of these costs twice as much and sells out before lunch. Guess which one has a line at noon?" The post got hundreds of likes. Walter read it. He felt it land. He closed the laptop. He went to the kitchen and began prepping the next day's dough. Month after month, the ritual continued in 2 halves, separated by a night. Every day around noon, it began quietly. Flour, water, salt, starter. And he mixed the dough, covered it, and left it alone. No rushing, no checking every hour, just time doing what only time can do. By 4 in the morning, he was back. The dough had been fermenting for 16 hours. He shaped each loaf by hand and slid them into a cold retard. A final slow proof that deepened the flavor even further. Then straight from the cold into a screaming hot oven. 45 minutes later, the bread was done. By 5:30, the first loaves were cooling on the rack. By 6, across the door was open. And still, most days, not enough people came to buy them. There is a specific kind of courage required to keep doing something well when the results haven't arrived yet. It is quieter than the courage of starting. It is harder than the courage of finishing. It is the courage of continuing day after day, when nothing confirms that you're right. Walter had that courage, not because he was certain. He wasn't. There were mornings, alone in the dark kitchen before the town had woken, when he thought about quitting the way you think about something that won't stop knocking on the door. He held the thought. He felt its weight. Then he set it down, shaped another loaf, and waited. Month 9. A food writer walked through the door. Caroline Voss was writing a piece about craft bakeries that had survived the chain expansion. And someone had pointed her to Walter, a woman at a farmer's market who said his bread was the closest thing to her grandmother's she'd tasted in 50 years. Caroline came in. She ordered nothing. She watched Walter for a few minutes, the way journalists watch, quietly, completely. Then she asked him to cut her a slice. She ate it. She took out her notebook. She asked him how long his fermentation was. She asked if he'd ever shortened it. And when he told her no, she asked the question that unlocked everything. Why not? Walter didn't have a rehearsed answer. He thought about it honestly, the way a man thinks who has lived with a question for a long time. I kept asking myself what I was actually selling, he said. If the answer is convenience, I'm already losing. The chain across the street will always have bread at noon, and I won't. But if the answer is real bread, then shortening the fermentation doesn't fix the problem. It just removes the thing that makes the bread worth making. The article ran 6 weeks later. The headline, "The Bakery That Waits." It didn't go viral. It didn't need to. It reached the people who were hungry for exactly what Walter had been making. People who knew the difference between fast and good, who had been choosing fast out of habit and good out of longing. People who were willing to be at the door at 6 in the morning because they understood what was waiting for them there. A line formed, not overnight, gradually. A few people Monday, more Wednesday. By Friday, they were waiting on the sidewalk when he arrived at 5 in the morning, standing in the early quiet before the rest of the town had decided what kind of day it was going to be. He sold out before 9:30 for the first time in months. He stood behind the empty counter and looked at the door where the last customer had left. Then he turned around, walked into the kitchen, and began the 18-hour process again. The demand grew. He expanded, not by cutting corners, but by building capacity. A larger kitchen, better proofing conditions. 2 new bakers trained in his method. The investor who had once urged him to speed up was now calling with restaurant groups and retail partnerships. All at Walter's terms. 18-hour fermentation, minimum. The chain across the street still sold more bread per day. Still had the longer line at 7 in the morning. Still had bread at noon when Walter's counter had long gone bare. Still had the loyalty of people who needed something fast and reliable. And there is nothing wrong with that need. Walter understood it now in a way he hadn't before. He had a mortgage too. He had known hunger that wasn't philosophical. He never fully closed the volume gap. Some months were still tight. Some partnerships fell through. One of his new bakers left for a restaurant that paid better, and Walter couldn't blame her. But something had shifted that he couldn't quite name. Not victory, not vindication. Something quieter. Like a frequency only certain people could hear. The ones who heard it kept coming back. And slowly, that was enough. Walter Green didn't succeed because he was the most talented baker. He didn't win because he had the best location, the biggest budget, or the most followers. He succeeded because he asked himself one honest question. What am I actually building? And refused to betray the answer, even when betraying it would have been easier, smarter, and safer by every conventional measure. Most people never face a test like his, but most people face a version of it. The moment the market shifts and you're tempted to cheapen your product to compete on price, the moment the algorithm changes and you're tempted to compromise your voice to chase reach, the moment the timeline tightens and you're tempted to cut the step that was holding the whole thing together. The shortcut is always available. The question is always the same. What will you give up to take it? Walter's answer was simple. Not easy, simple. He would give up everything except the one thing that made it worth building. Every morning, before the town was awake, he returned to the kitchen. Flour, water, salt, a starter culture he had kept alive for 7 years, descended from something older than his bakery, older than his fear. He mixed, he folded, he covered the dough and left it to rise. He didn't know if it would be enough. He had stopped needing to know. The bread needed 18 hours. So he gave it 18 hours. That was the whole thing. That was all of it. Not everything worth building can be optimized. Some things must simply be honored. Whether it's your craft, your career, or the life you're building. Some things don't respond to pressure. They respond to patience. Time is not the enemy of great work. It is the ingredient. Walter gave his bread 18 hours. You gave this story a few minutes. If it was worth your time, Tales by Cathie has more waiting for you. Subscribe, Leave a comment about what you are patiently building and share this with someone who needs the reminder.